Today we're here with the author Dr. Michael Sturman from the article Real Research with Fake Data, a tutorial on conducting computer simulation for research and teaching, published in the January 2025 issue of the Organizational Research Methods Journal. Dr. Sturman, welcome and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So for our interview today, we'll talk about the background story of the paper, such as the author's motivation and review process, as well as their further thoughts on taking this research forward. So to start us off, Dr. Sturman, can you give us a brief highlight of your article and how this article can help scholars in their research?
Absolutely. So this article is designed to be a tutorial. So it's a little different from a lot of other papers in organizational research methods, that it's not presenting really new or different findings. What it's doing is it's providing introductory material to help people conduct computer simulations. My personal experience in talking to others revealed that while there are some people who do computer simulations, most students don't ever get any training on how to do that. And since simulation can be so helpful both for research and teaching, my goal here was to provide an article to help step students through the process, or to help faculty through that process if they never had a seminar on that topic.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing the highlight of the paper and for honestly provide this guidance for scholars to be more familiar with using simulation in research and teaching. So first off, can you share with us what motivated you to study this topic and work on this paper?
Sure. So actually, I have a distinct moment I remember when I had the idea for this paper. And it was at the Academy of Management, and there was a session on Bayesian statistics. And honestly, I forget who was presenting it, but the presenter said something like, and you can check this yourself just by generating some correlated data and testing it yourself. But I'm sure everyone here knows how to do that. And I turned to other people at my table and said, I'm just curious, does anyone here know how to do that? And everyone at the table is like, I have no idea how to do that. And I thought, oh, we need simulation to be part of the education. So when statements like that are made, indeed, it's true that everyone's like, okay, yeah, I can generate some quick data and check it myself. When I've talked to people, other people who conduct simulations, almost all of them have some sort of background from either computer science or mathematics, that when they went into the PhD program, they already had computer programming knowledge. And for those who don't come with that background, there really was no way to gain knowledge on computer simulation. So there was a group of people who knew it and did it and enjoyed it, and a bunch of other people who just thought it was mystery and didn't want to even try to learn to figure it out. So the goal here is to try to expand the scope of who's able to do computer simulation, make it a little less mysterious, make it more useful for more people.
Yes, and I think as a very young scholar myself, I do resonate with the idea of I hear about simulation a lot, but I myself was really not familiar and don't really know how to start. So I think this paper provide a great guidance, a great good start for scholars who are not familiar with this topic. So with the review process, is there any interesting background story with the review process that will be helpful for the audience to know?
The review process was very constructive and very helpful. It was difficult at first because I think it wasn't well communicated that the purpose of the article was to be tutorial, as opposed to, the reviewers who were experts on simulation were like, well, this is all known. We all know this. So I had to do a better job reframing and making it clear that this is a tutorial and designed to be in some way more educational than field moving. But the reviewers were very helpful. They pointed out areas that needed to be expanded on, areas that they thought maybe needed less attention, to try to focus it and make it useful to a wider audience. They did also push me in the process to provide a little bit more material on advanced simulation. So instead of it going from just sort of beginner to moderate, it went from beginner to moderate with a little bit more information about where simulation can go beyond that with some more advanced techniques.
And I see in the article that you provide guidance for different software applications, so R and Excel. What did how did you decide on those tools?
So I sort of was looking at easy, medium, and hard as people come to this with different levels of experience. So pretty much everyone has access to Excel, and Excel is very helpful, especially if you're trying to create data sets for a class or teaching purposes. So I wanted to show how it could be done in Excel. Mplus is sort of another software package that's a little less programming than R, but more sophisticated and statistically oriented than Excel. So I sort of saw that as a medium step. And then R, of course, is the most flexible. And so I wanted to sort of show these three situations and three different ways that you could do essentially all of the different techniques. I also, and I'm just forgetting at the moment now, but someone contacted me who liked the article. They've provided also the files of it in Stata. And I have a graduate student this semester doing an independent study, and he's going to be providing all the examples in Python. So it's, again, it's a way of just expanding it and making it more useful for more people.
Yes, I think that's a really helpful tool, not to just have it in R, but also in other applications such as Stata and Python as well. So what is your evaluation on the current state of research around like the use of simulation data in management?
Um, I still think it's very bifurcated. You have some people who really are into simulation and get the complexity of the modeling that's involved. And then you have other people who don't know how to start, don't even know how to generate two variables correlated at a certain level that they want. And again, the goal here was not to push the edge of technology, but it was to provide that tutorial. And so my hope is that more people will start seeing simulation as a useful tool. And I'm hoping more people will see simulation as a methodology that can be used to complement articles or to write papers on their own.
What do you think are the challenges for scholars who like why are stimulation not common in management research yet?
Well, simulation requires you to be very specific. And that is an actual challenge. If you read a theoretical paper, and a lot of papers in AMR, for example, if you try to actually go from the paper to a coded simulation, it's often very challenging. You find in that process that many subtle assumptions are missing or not addressed. And to do a simulation using based on a theory, you really need to be very precise. And it's a little bit of a different way of thinking. And I think it's challenging. I would, love to see someday if every paper in AMR could be translated to simulation to have that level of precision and specificity so you knew exactly what was being modeled. But the other challenge is a lot of people just never had anything on simulation. Most courses on research methods don't cover it. If it's done usually just for power analysis. And so the idea of how do I use simulation to complement a theory, or how do I use simulation to complement a meta-analysis, is just something not a lot of people consider.
So with this, what do you think besides the challenge, what are the opportunities for this use of simulation in research nowadays?
Well, I guess another challenge, of course, is that reviewers. And a challenge now with simulation, if you write a simulation paper, it's going to people who are very sophisticated in simulation. And therefore might be a very high bar to get past because it's hard to sort of get that practice and build up your expertise in that methodology. So teaching reviewers also a little bit more about simulation will expand, I think, its opportunity. I had a paper once that used simulation, and a lot of people think simulation means instantaneous, unlimited data. And essentially they said, can't you just add this one thing? And our response to that paper when we did it was that requires us to generate more simulated people than have ever existed on Earth. And we think that is beyond the scope of what needs to be done in this paper. And it's just because I think the person wasn't familiar with simulation that they didn't realize when they said, couldn't you just add this, that it's
Mhm.
exponentially expanding the scope of what was being done. So I think educating not just authors, but reviewers as to what simulation entails will help people be better users and better consumers of the methodology.
And with helping reviewers and scholars become more familiar with the use of simulation, what are others future research directions or the trajectory of using simulation that you see or do you think in management scholar?
I'd love to see more use of simulation in theory building and theory testing. And again, I've tried at times to sit down with many AMR papers and say, how can I go from this to a simulation of exactly what they're theorizing? And it's often extremely challenging. There's just too many pieces missing. And I'd love to see theory get more specified so that it could be bridged with simulation more effectively. So I think that would improve both theory writing and theory building, and also would help with theory testing because would let us test assumptions. It would let you conduct a meta-analysis and see, does existing data correspond to the theoretical predictions that you've made? So I think there's some real opportunity there in the future to make simulation more normal. Not just a unique, weird, different paper, but just, hey, if you're going to present a theoretical model, it needs to be precise enough that you can articulate all the relationships that are inherently involved.
And with the increase of specificity, what are the challenges do you think that comes with that to really utilize simulation as a tool? And do you have, besides research, do you have examples for how to utilize this tool in teaching as well?
Sure. So specificity, I mean, writing a theory paper is already hard. It's difficult to write a good theoretical paper and develop it appropriately. You're then potentially layering on a whole nother level of complexity because you're trying to get the specificity needed to mathematically model what you're saying in the theoretical paper. And it's already hard enough to get into AMR to say, well, it's not hard enough, we need to do more. That's not necessarily a reasonable ask. So that's going to be a real challenge going forward. In terms of for teaching, there's so many opportunities for simulation with teaching, particularly with our greater emphasis being placed on evidence-based management. So for all of my courses, I'm generating data sets. I have, for teaching HR analytics, I have data sets where every student gets their own data set that represents a company, and this company is a restaurant chain that has 85 different branches. Each of those branches, you have the data on all the different employees, you have their performance, you have turnover information, what they get paid and so forth. And it simulates those employees over many different years. And then I have a workbook that lets students go through this analytics and answer questions. Every student gets their own data set, which reduces a lot of potential cheating in statistics courses because everyone's answer is going to be a little bit different, but it's very easy to grade because the simulation just creates a grade book for each individual data set. And then students really can get hands-on experience with very complex data sets. When I teach any of my methods courses, I generate data for all the different assignments. So when teaching multi-level theory and modeling, every week has a data set that then the students use to determine how do they do a multi-level confirmatory factor analysis, or how do they model a multi-level interaction. And so they get the hands-on experience doing it. And I can create the data sets in such a way that we know the model will converge. We know what the right answer is. So the students can get good practice with that. And then they can get real data and work, develop their skills in that to deal with the complexities that always come with real data.
Uh, when with the application of simulation in research and teaching, what are some advice you have for scholars who want to use this tool?
Uh, my advice is take it in small steps. Don't start figuring out simulation by trying to do an all-encompassing theory that covers all of AMR. Start with generating two variables, an X and a Y, that are correlated the way you want. Expand that to a few variables, multivariate, correlated with each other the way they want, or in a model the way you want. Design things for a class where it doesn't have to be as precise as if you're writing a paper for an A journal. And so by doing that, you develop your skills, and then eventually you can move to the theoretical paper, the combination of meta-analysis and simulation. But you need to do it in those kind of steps. I find, though, that doing simulation has really helped me understand other aspects of multivariate statistics, because by approaching it sort of from this different direction, by sort of starting with the model and moving to the data, it really sort of helps you understand, oh, this is really what coefficient alpha is doing. This is what it really means. This is what the multi-level analysis is doing to require things to come together in that way. And so it's really improved my skills with other statistical techniques, just because it's really sort of forced you to dig into those really subtle aspects of statistics and go, okay, this is why we do the things the way we do them.
Yes, and I find the idea of using simulation in AMR papers really fascinating, because what we have seen in traditional AMR are just theories. And what from your conversations with reviewers and other fellow scholars, what are the opinions or perspective on having data, even like simulation data in AMR paper?
Well, I've never done, I don't have an AMR paper or used an AMR paper. I did write a paper that was with Sang-Hee Park and JAP. And this paper combined meta-analysis and simulation. And essentially, the idea behind the simulation is it's impossible to collect, monthly data for 12 years. Right? We're not going to have that project done anytime, at best 12 years from now if we started today. But there's all this data out there that shows the way the world works. And meta-analysis indeed helps us represent the systematic ways that the world works based on previous research. And what we could do is we could specify some theoretical questions, say that we expect it to work this way, collected the meta-analysis based essentially on cross-sectional data or from time 1 to time 2 data, simulate a data set that was over 12 years, and show that, look, based on existing published research that, based on meta-analysis, we find these longitudinal effects that are consistent with our theoretical expectations. And so it was a way of testing some theory without having to collect the type of data that's necessary to test that theory. Because again, it's very difficult to collect monthly data over 12 years, just through the practical realities of it. But we were able to get data that conformed to real data through meta-analysis, but looked at from this sort of different angle. And that allowed us to answer some theoretical questions that previously we hadn't been able to answer.
Yes, and from our conversation today, and what I've as a young scholar known before about simulation seems to be a very powerful tool. Apart from what we have discussed today, is there anything else that you want to share with the scholars, the audience, or anything that will be helpful for the audience to know when they work with simulation data that we have not covered?
Sure. So I guess there's two key things that I always come back to with simulation that it's worth, I think, paying attention to. One is go back and always reread that 1982 chapter by McGrath called Dilemmatics, where it presents the strengths and weaknesses of all the different research methodologies. And simulation is just another research methodology. It complements field data, it complements experiments, it complements purely theoretical papers, and it has strengths and weaknesses like every other methodology. If you want to be a good researcher, it doesn't make sense to do 5 of the 6 pieces of pie on that chart. You want to be familiar with all the research methodologies that exist and be able to understand when one's going to be more useful than another. And it's always valuable, I think, to go back and look at that Dilemmatics paper, review the strengths and weaknesses. Think of simulation as just another tool in a research toolbox that you can use that sometimes is the right tool to use to answer certain questions. It sometimes is the absolute worst tool to answer other questions. So you don't do that. You do a different approach. You collect data, or you run an experiment. But sometimes simulation is the most useful way to answer certain questions, and it's useful to know when that occurs and how it contrasts with other methodologies. The other thing about simulation, this is sort of the other end when doing it, is at least at the moment, AI is not making the skills there go away. And that is, you can't just get into ChatGPT and say, write me code that generates data exactly this way. It can do it for simple aspects. And in the paper or research methods, we do provide samples where we ask ChatGPT to generate code. And it worked well for the simple cases, but for more complex cases like adding particular skew and kurtosis, or saying I want a multi-item measure with a particular level of alpha, and modeling a very specific model, ChatGPT is just not there yet. And I honestly don't think it'll ever be there. It will help for simple, but not the complex. And this is true also just in general for computer scientists, that you can use AI to help begin code and you can get base code from it, but you're going to need to go in and fix it and edit it and change it and make it specific to your needs. So you can't take the strategy of let me stall another few years and then I don't need to learn this stuff, because just it'll be AI and it'll handle it. I don't think that's going to happen. Just like I don't think AI is going to replace our statistical knowledge that we need to be able to run analyses. So it's a useful complement, but you can't just sort of put a pretty AI mask over the face of statistics and hope it gets simpler. I think it is something that people would benefit from learning.
Yes, and very insightful advice indeed for really understanding the basics, acknowledging the weakness and the strength of simulation as a tool, as well as honing our skill to be familiar with this tool as well. Well, thank you very much today. Thank you, Dr. Sturman, for sharing with us about the paper and also for your work on making the use of simulation closer to more scholars.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for taking the time to talk with me about the paper.